Something just changed in the Atlantic. For most of this hurricane season, the tropics have been sleeping, quiet, almost shockingly quiet. But right now, as we sit here on August 20th, bigger and stronger. Tropical waves are rolling off the coast of Africa. And for the first time all season, the forecast models are starting to wake up and pay attention. The next storm name on the list is Dolly, and the question every single person in the Caribbean, in Florida, along the Gulf Coast, needs to be asking right now is simple. Is the long quiet about to end? Because here is the truth. We are heading into the single most dangerous stretch of the entire hurricane season, the peak, the statistical bullseye. The window meteorologists have circled on the calendar for decades. And for the first time all season, the models are hinting that something might actually be trying to organize out there in the open ocean. Let me break down everything that is happening right now, what the waves look like, where the threats are, and what you need to be watching very carefully over the next 7 to 10 days. This is the update you need today. Let me start by giving you the full picture of what this 2026 Atlantic hurricane season has looked like so far, because you need that context to understand why what is happening right now matters so much. This season has been extraordinarily quiet. 2 named storms total, Arthur and Bertha, both formed earlier in the summer in the Gulf, and neither one reached hurricane strength. That is it. For comparison, the long-term average based on weather records going back decades calls for roughly 14 named storms in a full season. With about 7 becoming hurricanes, including 3 major hurricanes, we are nowhere near that pace. As of today, day 81 of the season, we have burned through less than 16% of the season's typical accumulated storm energy. That is not just quiet, that is historically slow, on pace to potentially become one of the least active Atlantic seasons in over a decade. And the reason for that is something called El Niño. El Niño is a natural climate pattern where water temperatures in the central and eastern Pacific Ocean run warmer than normal. When that happens, it reshapes the entire atmosphere above the Atlantic. It strengthens upper-level winds over the basin, and those stronger winds create what meteorologists call wind shear. Wind shear is the change in wind speed and direction with altitude, and it is a hurricane's worst enemy. When you have strong wind shear in the atmosphere, it literally tears developing storm systems apart before they can organize and strengthen. And right now El Niño is not just present, it is intensifying toward what forecasters are calling a super El Niño, potentially the strongest event in modern record. NOAA and Colorado State University have both been forced to revise their forecasts downward multiple times this summer as this El Niño has strengthened faster and more dramatically than expected. Colorado State's August update now calls for just 9 named storms total this year, with only 4 becoming hurricanes and just 1 reaching major hurricane status, a stunning drop from their original spring outlook of 13 named storms and 6 hurricanes. NOAA's most recent update puts the odds of a below normal season at 75%, up sharply from 55% earlier in the summer. This is why Colorado State University, one of the most respected seasonal hurricane forecasting centers in the world, has called for a well below normal season and has lowered its forecast multiple times already. Every single strong El Niño event on record has been associated with a below normal Atlantic hurricane season. Every single one. The data is clear. But here is what every coastal resident, every person in the Caribbean, every island community needs to hear right now. Below normal does not mean 0. Below normal does not mean safe. It takes only 1 storm making landfall to make your season the worst season of your life. Only 1. And here we are, right at the doorstep of peak season, and for the first time all summer, the bigger tropical waves are arriving. The sleeper is starting to stir. Now let me tell you about the Saharan dust, because this is the other major villain that has been strangling the Atlantic tropics all summer long. Saharan dust is exactly what it sounds like. Massive amounts of dry, dusty air that blow off the African continent and get swept westward over the Atlantic Ocean. When that dust settles into the atmosphere over the ocean, it does 2 things that are devastating for tropical development. First, it creates what is called the Saharan air layer, a dry, stable mass of air that sits in the middle levels of the atmosphere, right where tropical storms need moisture to grow. NOAA research shows that the air inside a Saharan dust plume contains about 50% less moisture than normal tropical air, 50% drier. That is like trying to light a campfire with soaking wet wood. The thunderstorm activity that seeds tropical systems gets choked off before it can even start. Second, the dust reflects sunlight, which can slightly cool the ocean surface, removing another ingredient that storms need to grow. Throughout June, July, and the first half of August, this dust has been relentless. Wave after wave of Saharan dust has crossed the Atlantic, and one after another the tropical waves, trying to develop, have run straight into this wall of dry air and simply fallen apart. You have been watching it happen if you follow the tropics closely. A wave exits Africa looking promising, the models light up briefly, and then it hits the dust, it hits the shear, and it dies over and over again. That has been the entire 2026 Atlantic hurricane season so far. a graveyard of promising waves that never made it out of the starting gate. But something is shifting. Saharan dust outbreaks do not last forever. Meteorologists who track these patterns know that the dust tends to become less dominant as we move deeper into August and into September. The peak of the Atlantic hurricane season climatologically falls around September 10th. That is the single most active date in the entire calendar, statistically. We are now approaching that window, and right on cue, bigger and stronger tropical waves are moving off the coast of Africa, arriving in a way we simply have not seen all season. Let me tell you exactly what we are tracking right now, as of this week. There are multiple tropical waves currently in motion. One is already moving through the eastern Caribbean, bringing scattered showers to areas including Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Barbados, St. Lucia, Trinidad and Tobago, Dominica, and Martinique. That particular wave is not expected to develop into anything organized, and the National Hurricane Center is not spotlighting it. But the attention is not really on that one. The attention is on what is coming behind it, and forecasters are now watching as many as 4 separate tropical waves stacked up like a conga line across the Atlantic basin. There are stronger tropical waves now moving off the coast of Africa into the main development region. The main development region is the stretch of tropical Atlantic between the African coast and the Caribbean, roughly between 10 and 20 degrees north latitude, where the ocean is warm, where conditions can become favorable, and where Cape Verde-type hurricanes, the long-tracking, powerful storms that can cross the entire Atlantic Ocean, are born. The waves now exiting Africa are stronger than anything we have seen move into that region all season. And for the first time all summer, a couple of forecast models are actually trying to develop one of these waves into a genuine tropical system. The European model, widely considered one of the best global weather models available anywhere in the world, is developing a significant tropical wave into a tropical storm in the coming days, and eventually working it toward the west-northwest. Some of the more excitable ensemble members inside that same European system are even hinting at the possibility of a major hurricane spinning up not far off the African coast itself, a classic Cape Verde-type system. The AI-driven model known as AIFF has also picked up on this same wave, showing a tropical depression or tropical storm developing in the eastern main development region within roughly 6 days. Typically, a storm born that far east near Africa would need 13 days or more before any potential United States impact even becomes a conversation. And historically, the vast majority of these classic Cape Verde systems simply curve out to sea and never threaten land at all. Now, the American GFS model, the Canadian model, and the German ICON model are not going along with that development. They are keeping these waves as strong tropical waves, but not organizing them into anything more. So there is a genuine disagreement among the models right now, and that disagreement itself is important information. It tells you that conditions are not clearly hostile anymore. If development were completely impossible, all the models would agree it was not going to happen. The fact that the European model and the AI ensembles are trying to spin something up tells you the door is cracking open, even if only slightly. The main reason for disagreement, as it has been all season, is dry air and dust. That dry air is still sitting out ahead of these stronger tropical waves, cruising across the Atlantic and doing damage to anything trying to organize behind it. Multiple models show a strong wave pushing westward and then weakening as it encounters that dry air ahead of it, somewhere out over the open Atlantic before it ever reaches the eastern Caribbean. You can watch it happen on the model runs in real time. A wave exits Africa looking organized, moves west, and then slowly falls apart as it runs into that invisible wall of dryness sitting in its path. But the question everyone in the tropics is asking is how long that dry air can hold on. Because we know that as we move deeper into the season, the dust tends to reduce and the moisture tends to increase across the basin. If one of these stronger waves can make it through the dry air without completely falling apart, and if it finds a pocket of better conditions on the other side, the potential is there for something real to form. Now let me tell you about the Pacific side of this story, because that is equally important and not enough people are paying attention to it. The Eastern Pacific has been the exact opposite of the Atlantic this season. While the Atlantic has been suppressed by El Niño, the Pacific has been running above its historical average for activity, because El Niño actually enhances Pacific hurricane development instead of suppressing it. And already this season, the Pacific has produced some genuinely serious storms. Hurricane Fausto, which formed back in late July, became the first hurricane of the season in either the Atlantic or the Pacific. It peaked as a Category 2 storm with 105 mile-per-hour winds in the eastern Pacific before it began weakening as it moved toward the central Pacific. Even as it weakened, it threatened Hawaii, forcing forecasters to monitor it closely as it passed north of the islands. The Central Pacific Hurricane Center issued advisories, and a high surf advisory was put in place for east-facing shores of Hawaii, with surf reaching as high as 15 feet. Fausto eventually became post-tropical, but not before producing rough and dangerous seas across a wide stretch of ocean. And then, Hurricane Genevieve came right behind it. Genevieve rapidly intensified into a major storm and became the first Category 5 hurricane of the entire 2026 season anywhere in the world, Atlantic or Pacific, with maximum sustained winds reaching an astonishing 160 miles per hour in late July, while the Atlantic was sitting completely still. Most models keep the system to the south of the Big Island, but when you are talking about Hawaii, you watch these things closely no matter where the center of the storm ultimately tracks, because the rainfall, the surf, and the coastal flooding potential can still reach the islands even from a system that passes relatively close by. Elsewhere in the Pacific, a typhoon in the western basin is rapidly intensifying and expected to reach super typhoon strength, while a separate hurricane spins harmlessly out in the open central Pacific, a reminder of just how much tropical energy is currently loaded into this ocean compared to the Atlantic sitting right next door. Back here in the United States, Florida is looking at a better chance of scattered afternoon showers and storms over the next few days, with some 3-day rain totals potentially approaching 6 inches in parts of the state, where the rain trains repeatedly over the same areas. That is something to watch, because slow-moving showers and storms can produce localized flooding, even without any tropical system involved at all. The Gulf Coast states, including Mississippi and Alabama, could also see a few showers this week. Parts of the mid-Atlantic, including Virginia and North Carolina, are looking at the possibility of 2 to 5 inches of rain over the next couple of days, with some severe weather potential mixed in. New England is also seeing rain, with Cape Cod and the surrounding areas looking at elevated rain chances heading into the weekend, and that moisture is expected to lift up toward Atlantic Canada shortly after. Farther south, northern Colombia is seeing 40 to 50% rain chances, and parts of Venezuela that are not already under direct impacts from recent earthquakes could also see some passing showers. The seas are also running a bit rough from Jamaica south toward Colombia, with waves around 2 meters, roughly 6 to 7 feet, making for bumpier conditions in those shipping passageways. And Dolly could come from one of these stronger tropical waves now exiting Africa. Or, in an unusual twist, forecasters are also watching a completely different non-tropical area of low pressure sitting off the coast of Portugal that could potentially transition into a named tropical storm as well, with the National Hurricane Center currently putting its odds around 20%. If either the European model or the AI ensembles verify on the African wave instead, the timing would be roughly 1 to 1.5 weeks from now, putting a developing system somewhere over the open Atlantic, working its way westward, potentially toward the Lesser Antilles and possibly into the Caribbean itself. Here is why this matters beyond just one storm. The pattern we are entering right now is the critical window. August 20th through September 10th is climatologically the most dangerous stretch of the entire Atlantic hurricane season. This is when sea surface temperatures in the tropics are at their warmest point of the year. This is when the African monsoon is still pumping out tropical waves with steady regularity. This is when, even in suppressed years like this one, conditions can locally and temporarily become favorable enough for a wave that is just a little stronger and a little better organized than the rest to break through the shear, break through the dust, and spin up into something significant. History is full of examples of exactly this happening. Seasons that looked completely dead in early August have gone on to produce a devastating late-season hurricane. 1992 was a quiet year, and Hurricane Andrew still happened, one of the most destructive hurricanes in American history, born from a season nobody was worried about until it suddenly mattered more than any other storm that year. The lesson has never changed. Quiet does not mean safe. So what makes these current, stronger waves different from everything we have seen earlier this summer? 2 things. First, the waves themselves are physically stronger, with more organized tropical convection, more spin at low levels, and more organized outflow at the upper levels. These are not the garden variety weak tropical waves that have been sliding harmlessly through the Atlantic all summer without a second look from forecasters. Second, we may be entering a brief window where the dust reduces just enough, and the shear relaxes just slightly in certain areas, that one of these waves catches the right pocket of conditions and actually starts to organize into something real. The European model sees it clearly. The AI ensembles see it too, to a slightly lesser degree. The American model and others say not yet. That disagreement will resolve itself over the coming days as we get closer in time, because models generally become more reliable the closer you get to the actual event they are trying to predict. So the plan right now is simple. Watch the satellite imagery. Watch whether these waves maintain their organization as they cross the Atlantic, or whether the dry air chews them apart the way it has done to every single wave before them this season. Watch whether that dust layer starts to break down as we move deeper into the calendar. Watch the sea surface temperatures in the central Atlantic as these waves approach, since the water off the African coast is currently sitting near a very warm 28.5 to 30 degrees Celsius. And watch the models, because they will start converging on an answer as this window plays out. If you live in the Caribbean, if you live in Florida, if you are anywhere in the potential path of whatever the Atlantic ultimately decides to produce over the next 2 weeks, I want you to use this quiet time wisely, because it will not last forever. The worst thing that can happen is not that a storm forms. The worst thing that can happen is that a storm forms, intensifies quickly, and you're not ready for it. Rapid intensification in the modern era, where sea surface temperatures are warm and El Niño can still create very localized pockets of low shear even in an otherwise hostile season, can take a storm from a minimal tropical storm to a dangerous hurricane in a matter of hours. We have seen that movie play out too many times in recent years to assume it cannot happen again. Do not wait for the storm to have a name before you pay attention. The time to pay attention is right now, when the waves are stronger, when the models are starting to hint, and when the calendar itself is telling you that the peak of the season has arrived. Talk to your neighbors about what you will do if a watch or a warning is issued in your area. These are not scary things to think about. These are practical things, the kind of preparation that costs almost nothing now and can save everything later. And the fact that the season has been quiet so far actually works against people in a strange, almost dangerous way. Quiet seasons make people complacent. They stop checking the weather. They stop thinking about the tropics entirely. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, a storm comes, and they are not ready for it. That gap between a quiet summer and a sudden, fast-moving threat is exactly where the worst outcomes happen. Year after year, storm after storm. The 2026 Atlantic hurricane season has been historically quiet through August 20th. Only Arthur and Bertha, no hurricanes at all. A super El Niño doing exactly what it was expected to do, suppressing development month after month. Saharan dust filling the tropics and choking off wave after wave before it could ever organize. Wind shear tearing apart anything that tried to get off the ground. But the bigger waves are here now. The models are finally paying attention. The peak season window is wide open, running through the second week of September. And Dolly is waiting to be named, somewhere out there in the Atlantic or off the coast of Portugal, depending on which system wins the race first. Stay with the tropics over the coming days. Watch what these waves do as they cross one of the most dangerous stretches of ocean on the planet during the most dangerous stretch of the calendar. I will be keeping you updated every step of the way as this situation develops. Be ready, not scared. Prepared, not panicked. And remember, after a whole season of quiet, it only takes one storm to change everything.